Here's a look at the upcoming international friendlies for the U.S. women's national team ahead of the Olympic Games. South Korea twice, June 1st and June 4th, and then the send-off matches against Mexico and Costa Rica in July. And of course, these are the first matches that Emma Hayes will be at the helm of the U.S. women's national team. For that, we bring in our expert, Sandra Herrera, who actually sat down with Emma Hayes and got to speak to her. So, Sandra Herrera, what is the biggest takeaway from your first conversation with Emma Hayes as the U.S. women's national team manager?
I gotta say, Jenny, honestly, it's that she delivered. She's exactly who she is and who basically we all knew she was going to be. She's completely 100% Emma Hayes at all times, whether she's on the sidelines or doing a media junket in New York, whether that's going to be with the Today Show or us at Golazo or ESPN, or if she's sitting with a number of us in the media. She is absolutely authentic and self-aware to who she is.
That's why we love her, Sandra. And it's been such a build-up for Emma Hayes eventually coming here, and now she's here, she's landed, she's on the turf. So we have entered the Emma Hayes era with the United States women's national team. How is this era going to be different?
You know, I think she's going to bring in just a lot of kind of belief, a lot of planning. She spoke a lot about being strategic. She's fully aware that they only have a handful of weeks for the Olympics and that lots of people are going to have question marks around the bigger picture. Because one thing we also know is that even though the Olympics is just a short timeline away, she's going to be here for at least 2027. We knew what that contract was going to be. So there's a lot of curiosities around her role in the bigger picture of kind of getting this United States women's national team program kind of back to prominence, really. But she's really preaching a lot of patience and really preaching a lot of belief in the processes. She says she's someone that does not like to operate in silos, so she wants to really get into this camp and really is looking forward the most to her one-on-ones with the players, which they've had scheduled for quite some time now.
Sandra, did Emma Hayes speak more about how she's balancing this initial first camp with the U.S. women's national team on the veterans she's bringing in versus the younger players who maybe don't have as much experience, and how she's kind of considering weighing that going into the Olympics?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good shout to make, in particular with some of the roster movement that we saw in this recent camp announcement. I think there's a little bit of an energy where there's kind of a clean slate, even though this last 6 months we've seen so much from Twyla Kilgore and how she's been running the team, and we've started to see just some small things being introduced tactically, which obviously came through the collaborative process between the two coaches. But I think maybe one of the most obvious kind of points within all of that is the fact that we're going to potentially see Crystal Dunn on the pitch as a forward because she was listed as a forward, and that's part of it. I think when we're taking a look at veterans, maybe there is that note of a clean slate, even with all of this coming into a new era. So there's opportunity for players who have been around this national team camp program to make an impact, maybe a new one, maybe leave a new impression that they are trying to leave for this coaching staff, because it's not just Emma Hayes that's coming into the mix in this one. Yes, she's going to be on the sidelines, but there's also going to be a lot of new members on the coaching staff as well, folks who are going to be responsible for the team overall, for the staff overall. So there's a lot of new names and new faces alongside Emma Hayes to kind of make sure that if you're a veteran, that you are leaving that impression, even if you already had that reputation. So with Crystal Dunn having been with this team for quite some time, she's going to get a chance to do that again, but this time as an attacking player.
I love this. I guess that like a bunch of the players are going to have a clean slate in a way that they might not have had before. But before we get into the players, Sandra, I just want to, the biggest question I have is like taking on this team about a month, less than 2 months ahead of the Olympics, compared to her long-term plan that she has for this team. How do you kind of implement that in such a short amount of space and focus on one or the other?
There's an emphasis on winning. That was dropped a lot during the conversation that she had with some of us in the media roundtable. That's part of the culture, and I think that's the similar thread between this new head coach and players who have either been here for a while or even players who are just finding themselves really in the mix of the senior national team level for the first time. That is kind of the commonality between all of them, no matter if you're just showing up or you've been here for a while. And I think that's really important. I think we even heard Twyla Kilgore mention that a little bit coming out of the World Cup, that they wanted to build off of that final performance in the World Cup, because despite the result, they felt it was their best performance. They wanted to make sure that newer faces and younger names getting into the mix were getting a taste of that culture, because they wanted to reset that a little bit in terms of getting back to what made USA. Because Emma Hayes also didn't shy away from the fact that this United States women's national team program is not feared anymore across the globe. She said that in our media roundtable, and that they want to get back to that they need to acknowledge that very, very quickly to make sure that they have that competitive edge going into the Olympics.
That competitive edge comes from, of course, Hayes, right, and the top down, but also the players she's bringing in. Because with this initial roster that she fully has developed herself, she's also brought in a number of training players. So to me, that says that Emma Hayes wants to look at a lot of different players. Crystal Dunn being moved to that forward line. What did she say about seeing some of these different players in person, having those one-on-one meetings? Is there anyone in particular she really wants to see in person?
Yeah, she was asked about Jaden Shaw specifically, and she kept it very professional and said that Jaden's been doing a lot of great things. But now that Emma Hayes is here, that now that she's here, she has to see it herself in action. So I think this is a player that she's particularly excited to get involved with. Those one-on-ones actually aren't going to happen until they finally get into camp. So those are likely going to happen either today on Monday or during this week in the build-up to preparations for those June friendlies. So I think there's a number of players I think folks are excited for Emma Hayes to kind of work closely with and alongside with, but she's still sort of keeping those cards, a little bit close to the vest. Unless she's being asked directly about those specific players, she'll be more than happy to speak about them. But Jaden Shaw was one of them, Katarina Macario as well, because this is the player that is making her way back into the mix as well from an extended injury, but is also having a little bit of that experience alongside Emma Hayes as well. And she noted the fact that having a couple of players, whether it's in Crystal Dunn or Katarina Macario, is going to be helpful also to kind of her shift into this national team role as well.
Sandra, did she speak any more on, maybe not including certain players that we initially expected? We know Andy Sullivan got a kind of late invite into camp. Lynn Williams isn't going to camp. Did she make any sort of commentary on, these players that we sort of expected to be, at least on this initial camp, that aren't going in?
Not directly and not by name, but I think there's kind of the impression that no one's out of the mix, but they are trying to get those final looks, those final evaluations in with the roster set to be named. Not a lot of time till then. There's even less time for when they're going to name this actual roster. So I think it's a likely scenario that the regular suspects that we've seen in camps are the ones that are probably going to be whittled down to this final roster. So while no one is actually, quote unquote, out of the mix for getting call-ins to national team camps, I think when it comes to this Olympic roster, we can start whittling it down to players that we've seen pretty regularly over the last 6 months.
Sandra, I had the pleasure of speaking with Emma Hayes for a segment here on Attacking Third and Morning Footy with Charlie Davies, and she was great. I mean, the energy that she brought, she said that she was just buzzing doing all the media that she did last week. But she did tell us pretty upfront, hey, I'm not going to talk too much about tactics. I want to focus on some other things. I keep those cards close to my chest. Since you were a bit of like a closed-door conversation with her, did you get any tactics out of her?
Oh, they want to work on ball progression for sure. But I think other than that, nothing too much in terms of what the actual formation is going to be, who's going to be slotted into where. She's definitely keeping that close, no matter who she's speaking to, whether it's you or me at this point. And listen, I respect it. I think that's part of the game at this point, a little bit of what we're used to week in, week out when we do get media availabilities with coaches. And I think the fact that this is her first week, really, I don't think she wants to give too much away too soon. But I wouldn't be surprised if once we actually have a game in front of us to see from this United States women's national team squad, that maybe Emma Hayes and the coaching staff might be a little bit more open in terms of what expectations that they're laying out for their ideal 11 or for their ideal 16 to kind of go ahead and what they're going to execute on the pitch.
Well, Sandra, she can keep it as close to her chest as she wants right now. Soon we're going to have Lisa and Darian breaking down all of the tactics that we're going to be seeing from Emma Hayes, so we will know soon enough. Thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it.
All right, that is our show for today. We're going to be back in studio on Thursday at 11 p.m. and live on YouTube on Wednesday will be Sandra and Lisa. Thanks so much. joining us on Attacking Third, brought to you by CarMax, the way car buying should be.